Morning members. I'm just going to do a brief update or progress video on growing some plants epiphytically up our trees or on rockeries or in an elevated position, whether they be on tree stumps, etc., and the different types of plants that we use and ways that you can mount them and the time it takes for them to attach to trees, etc., varies depending on their growing conditions. So what we've got here is Echmea orlandiana, and this particular one is rainbow, and you can see its pretty colours starting to develop at the moment. Now originally it was just the mum in the middle, and now it has a couple of pups, one on either side, which are growing on stolons, and then they themselves are attached to the tree beneath by roots. Now, originally these were attached with just some garden twine, so black garden twine, so it eventually will break off and the plant will then just be secured by its own root system. Now, along with Echmeas, another good form of plant to grow are Tillandsias. This particular one that you're looking at here is Houston, which gets a lovely pink flower, and then it will produce pups as well as it grows. Eucinoides obviously is a really good one to attach to trees. They prefer to be attached to trees and get the humidity from that environment versus being attached to a wire structure. So using natural wood products to attach them, whether that be simply a pine cone or whether or not you simply, as I do, drape them over the actual tree itself. They will flower, which this one has done, and produce seeds, and then the clump gets larger and larger over time, so it's able to be moved around the garden as mine has been doing over the last few years. Now, another plant that's really good to use in forks of trees or attached to branches are Bromeliads. These ones are bilberges, and these ones are in flower at the moment. So this clump here has been planted several years ago, and it's matured really well, and there are a lot of plants as it's in the fork of a tree, so it didn't need to be attached in any way. It doesn't require any kind of substrate, so therefore it's really good to use in trees. Any plants that grow on stolons, like these Echmeas grow on stolons, are perfect to be used as epiphytic plants because they don't require any soil at all. So you're able to mount these onto trees. You can staple their little stolons onto a tree wherever you find you want it, or you can actually even just nail them on and then cover it. A U-nail is a really good one, or a horseshoe nail is good to attach these ones if you're attaching them en masse, and then they will continue to climb up the tree. So here is a orlandiana, which is not attached by anything. It was originally attached by garden twine, but its roots have now attached to the tree after about 6 months, and so it's now growing upwards, up the tree, which is exactly what I wanted to do. This is the original plant mum, and here's a little pup heading up the tree, and so it will continue. Now, this is a coral tree, a Madagascar coral tree, so they'll continue to grow up. There's also some Tillandsia palaceae here as well, which just keeps it a little bit tidy and hides it around the base while it's maturing, and gives a little bit of definition to the plant. And once again, another orlandiana. So Echmeas are very successful at growing and attaching. This is completely attached. The mum was in the centre, and she's long gone, and what I've ended up with is a pup on either side now, and it's going to make its way up this pine tree and eventually cover the pine tree. So some time ago, members, we were doing a how to do these trees, and this is the example of the tree that I was working on in that previous video about a year or so ago. And so this particular one contains Quesnelias, and they get a lovely red flower on them which lasts for months, and they go all the way around the tree to give me a lot of different colour. It's got a mix of tillandsia. It also has some Echmea ricavatas. They do really well tied up on trees as well, and some Houstons and Gardinii, which are tillandsias. There is some Palaceae tillandsia as well, and they were all put in place just to hide the tree tie at the time, the garden twine at the time, but now they just basically have all established themselves, and so they remain in place. There's one of the Quisnellias that is coming out in flower in the lower area. Now in the lower area I've also put some orchids as well as some other tillandsias and some different ricavatas as well, some different coloured ones, which are doing really well down below. Now it gets a little bit of tree fall from the pine tree above, but not enough to worry it, so it's very easy to come along and just take the pine needles out if I need to. Otherwise, basically the plants are attaching themselves. They have their root systems now attached to the pine tree, and they're now producing pups, which are also now going to start filling out the gaps in the tree, and eventually that whole area will be a nice full display. Same goes with this tree. It's a different type of tree. It's a deciduous tree, so it drops a lot of foliage. So putting the plants very close around the stems of the tree avoids a lot of that leaf falling. So once again, lots of Echmeas, different forms of Hollandianas, some of the grandfather's beard or Eucinoides to be used as a bit of a waterfall type feature, and then I've done a couple of rows again so that as they grow upwards up the tree. Now they're all attached now. They still have the plant tie. I haven't removed it, but I could remove if I wanted to. Now your older mums will start to die off, and that's fine. You just break them out of the way, and beneath you'll find you've got some nice little young plants that are attached and have already started to progress up the tree. In this case you're looking at one of the Hollandiana ensigns, which is growing up the tree. That's that variegated form there. Now this tree was done more recently, about 6 months ago, and it contains one of the species of Hollandiana, and then beneath it has some tillandsias, and then it has sprays of Eucinoides. There's also orchids growing in here. There's a large orchid, one of the dancing ladies oncidiums. As we progress up the tree, there are more and more tillandsias that are attached. This is a deciduous tree which was completely cut back to stumps, and so the plants were added when it was completely cut back. Beautiful Gardinii there that's starting to come into flower area has been attached as well, Gardinii, and then once again some more Hollandiana behind it. So all I'm doing is keeping these lower branches trimmed off away from this display that's been created, and I'm allowing all of the top shoots to grow upwards, so I'll end up with like an umbrella type canopy when I'm doing these types of displays. Now fences, like I said, you can do as well. Lots of different options for your fences. I happen to have a galvanised fence between myself and my bush section, which I leave native, and what I do with that is I drape the Eucinoides all along it, and it's quite happily growing there, and then I move it to wherever it is that I need it to go in different places. I also got my large tillandsias. They are utriculatus. And there are a few of them, but if you leave them long enough you'll end up with these gorgeous long tendrils that are cascading down, so it ends up being quite a large plant. So that one there is attached to the fence, just gives a little bit more interest to the fence. Another trick is also tying along your branches your different tillandsias as well. So plants you can use. The only plants that I find you can't use when you're doing a elevated or trying to make a raised garden. And here's another tree that we did as well that's got Eucinoides. In the fishing line I've added some Tillandsia ionothas as well. And then I've got my typical Echmeas, the Olandianas, then some different strictas as well, so different forms of Tillandsias just to add some dimension, and then back to the Quesnelias again. Now, like I said, the only plants that I wouldn't be using to do as a epiphytic garden style would be Varetia and Alcantaria. All of the others would be able to be used in the trees. Echmea burgundy, which is this lovely dark blush red colour one. It's old variety. It's a very tough one. Stands right out. And then around the side of that, once again, more of the Orlandiana. Now, with these trees, another thing you can use is Chantineis. So once again, they're an Echmea, but again, they're a different striated looking plant if you want a different look other than just the Orlandiana, which comes in a huge range of colours. Now, the reason I say that you can't use plants like Varetias or Alcantarias due to their size mostly, and the fact that Alcantarias will move around following the sun, so they often need to be repositioned frequently, which is a bit of a challenge if you've got a plant attached to a tree. The reason I wouldn't do Varetias is because they require terrestrial feeding. They like to get nutrients from their potting mixes as well as from their vase, so they're not suitable for growing up trees unless you're going to create a pocket using, say, coir fibre to create a pocket like I do with the smaller neos. So this is a little pouch that's made out of cocoa fibre that you can buy flat rolls of, and then you simply have to fold them in half, fill them up with potting mix, and then secure them. I've put a video up before on how to make them. Now, they can be hooked on the wire or a tree or anywhere that you want them to be. In this case, I've just got them sitting next to some of the chicken pens at the moment, and beneath it I've got the Eucinoides once again trailing from it. So this is a good way to do miniature Neoregulias that aren't on stolons, although these ones tar babies are. But if you do want to do little clumps and have them up in trees, you can make yourself one of these little pockets and then fill it up with good potting medium. In this case, I used my seed raising mix, which is cocoa fibre peat, and it also contains, so it's cocoa peat with some vermiculite and some perlite and a little bit of fertiliser, not very much, because the cocoa peat fibre that I use does contain fertiliser to feed these guys for up to 9 months, so they don't require any more. So doing a little pocket is another option as well. Alright, so that's my updated video with lots and lots of editing required to get to that stage. So I hope you've all learned a little bit, and if you do have quite a lot of, say, Echmea ricavatas, or any Echmea for that matter, that you just have got to find the space for them, a good place for them, instead of in pots and them overflowing, would be to take them out of these pots and find a place to attach them to a tree instead. These are all about to blush their beautiful red. These are the rock lobsters as well as a few varieties, and they're just getting their red on now. They're pretty. All right, that's my update. Thanks very much. Happy gardening, everybody, and enjoy the weekend.